Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we are taking on another exciting Dribbble design and bringing it to life using React and Tailwind. But this time we are working with Tailwind version 4, the latest version packed with new features and improvements. We'll start by breaking down the design, setting up our project and then coding it step by step. By the end of this video, you'll have a beautiful website that looks just like the Dribbble inspiration. So if you love front-end development, enjoy building stunning UIs, or just want to level up your React and Tailwind skills, make sure to stick around and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Now let's dive right in. So let's set up the project first. As you can see, we have to run the white command to set up a white project. Then we'll integrate Tailwind with it. Here I will select React with TypeScript. Now again, this is just a design implementation and there will be no functionality involved, so you can choose to use JavaScript if you prefer that, but I will stick with TypeScript. Now I'll install the dependencies. Now I'll run the project to see if it's working or not. As you can see, the project is up and running. The next step is to integrate Tailwind with it. With a new version of Tailwind, it has become incredibly simple to integrate it with White. We just need to install the dependencies and use the plugins, as you can see. So I'll copy this command. I'll paste the command to install the dependencies, and then in white config.ts I'll paste the required plugin. And after React I'll write Tailwind CSS. And now in our index.css file, I'll select all, delete, I'll just paste this. Now if we go to app.tsx, I'll remove everything. I'll just have a div with an h1 saying hello world and the class name of text red 500. I remove this, and see if this works or not. So I'll run the server again. Now if we move to the browser, we can see that it is working. The text appears to be red. Now we can move forward with the development of our website. So we'll start by implementing the nav bar. As you can see, the nav bar has three parts: this logo, these nav links, and this button. But if you look closely, this logo and these nav links appear to be a little bit together, and this is separate altogether. So the design implementation, we can implement this by making this section entirely separate and joining these two together. Okay, so let's do that. So first of all, I'll make a new folder called components, and inside the components I'll create a new file called navbar.tsx. I will define the component like this, and I will remove this h1 and use the navbar component here. Now if you look in the browser, you can see the navbar appears. So now we can implement the navbar. Now since this is a navbar, so instead of a div we'll have a nav tag the class name of this nav tag will be with full. It will be a grid with 7 columns. Okay, now inside the nav will come 2 divs. As I told you, the navbar has 3 parts, but we'll group the first 2 parts together and make the button separate entirely. So the first div will receive a class name which is col span of 5. This means that the first part will cover 5 columns, while the second div will receive a class name of col span of 2. So as you can see, the grid is made up of 7 columns. Of those 7 columns, 5 will be covered by the first div and 2 will be covered by the second div. Now the other class names for the first div will be flex, items, center, justify, start. Now we'll implement the second div first, that is we'll implement the button first. Let's do that. So inside the div will be a button. The class name of this button is quite long, so I'll fast forward here. Now as you can see, this border tertiary and text primary, these have no effect on the, basically these class names are not do not exist right now. We have to make them on our own. These are custom class names, so we'll implement them later. Now inside the button we'll write download the app. After that it will be a div with the class name of width of 22 pixel and a negative margin bottom of 1. Inside the div will be an image and the source will be download.svg and the alternate name will be download. The class name here will be with full and object contain. Now let's see how this looks. It won't look nice because some of the class names are missing at the moment, but for the sake of it, let's just look. As you can see, the button appears here. Next we'll implement those custom class names and see how the button looks. Now another feature of Tailwind version 4 is that we no longer have the Tailwind config file. So any necessary configuration for Tailwind will go right in the index.css file. So for that we'll write theme and I'll just paste the value of the colors here. So as you can see, the primary color will be this, the secondary color will be this, and the tertiary color will be this. Now if we save this, and now if you look at the button, you can see the border went from being black to the tertiary color which we specified. Next we'll implement the rest of the navbar. Now the rest of the navbar will be inside the first div. So inside that div we'll have 2 divs. The first one will have the class name of width of 120 pixel and a margin left of 10. Inside this div will be an image tag and the source of that will be text underscore logo dot svg and the alternate name will be logo. The class name here will be with full and contain. Now below this div we'll have another div, and the class name here will be flex of 1, flex items center, justify center, and a gap of x of 12. Inside that div will map over the nav links, which I'll paste after this. Dot map item, and will return an a tag where the href will point to nowhere. The class name for this will be text sm, text primary, font medium, and inside it will be there item dot title. Now I'll just copy paste the nav links. Now let's look in the browser. As you can see, the navbar appears, but the navbar is not proportional to its size. So next component we'll implement is the container component, which will help us with the margins and stuff. Now we are going to implement the container component. For that I'll create the container component file, container.tsx. now rfce. Now this will take in as props children, and the type of children will be react node. Inside the div will return the children, and the class name for this div will be maximum width of 1200 pixel, maximum 1200 pixel, margin x of 2, and mx auto, and padding y of 2. Now in app.tsx we'll have to wrap navbar with the container component. So I'll cut it, container, and inside container we'll paste the navbar. Now if you look at the browser, we can see the navbar has shrunk in size. So before we move forward, I just want to make one correction. As you can see, the height of the navbar seems to be a bit too much. That's because I made a mistake here. As you can see, the height is set to 29 and it should not be. The height is supposed to be 20. So before moving forward, just correct it. And now if we move to the browser, you can see the navbar appears to have the correct height. Now we are going to implement the hero section. The hero section will comprise of this, this, and this. So these three cards will comprise the hero section. Now as you can see, the space separation of the cards are similar to the navbar. So again, as we did in the navbar, we'll again divide the space into a 7-column grid, of which 5 will be occupied by this card and the other 2 will be occupied by these 2 cards. So let's get started. So first of all, I'll create a new file, hero section, then This div will receive a class name of margin top of 3. Inside this div will be another div, the class name of which will be grade goals of 7, gap x of 3, and a gap y of 4. So just like before, we have divided the space into 7 columns, of which the first div will occupy 5 columns. So the class name will be col span of 5. Also the row span will be of 2. That's because if you look at the design, the larger card occupies 2 rows, right? So that's why row span of 2. Now the rest of the class names will be bg of secondary, rounded 4xl, flex, items, center, justify, center, and relative. Now inside this div there will be 2 divs. The first one will receive the class name width of 700 pixel and a negative margin bottom of 12, and inside the div will be an image tag, and the src will be hero.svg with the alt being hero. Now below this div will be the second div, and the class name for that is quite long, so I will fast forward here as well. Now inside this div will be another div, and the class name for that will be width of 20 pixel. Inside that it will be an image tag with source being apple.svg and the alt being apple, and class name of with full object contain and invert. Below this div I'll write top charts. Now in the app.tsx below the navbar, if we use hero section and then look at the browser, we can see the card appears like this. Now the size of the card is not correct, but that will be okay if when we implement these rest 2 cards. Now after 2 divs from the top charts, we'll have another div. The class name here will be col span of 2, rounded 4xl with full height 96, bg of d2 ade 7, relative overflow hidden, and a padding of 6. Inside this div we'll have another div, inside which we'll have an h3 with the class name of text primary and text 2xl and font of semibold. Here we'll write get 7 br tag this trial. Below the h3, below the div we'll have another div which will have the image tag, and the src will be phone.svg, and the alt will be phone. Class name here will be with full object contain, and the class name of this div will be with full absolute minus bottom of 8 and left of 0. Let's see how this looks like in the browser. As you can see, the card appears here. Now one more card will appear, and when we code that out, the size of this bigger card will match that card. Now for the third card, we can have a div here, and the class name here will be code span 2 rounded for Excel with full bg primary and a padding of 6 again. Inside that div will be a div. Here the class name will be flex item start justify between. Inside the div we'll have an h3 with the class text white, text to Excel, and a max width of 180 pixel. Inside the h3 we'll write this. Now below h3 there will be a div with an image, so the div class name here will be width of 30 pixel, and inside the div will be the image tag, and src will be arrow up right dot svg, and alt will be arrow. The class name here will be with full object contain invert and font semibold. Let's see how this looks like. So as you can see, the card appears here, and we have implemented the top part of the card. Now here we can the class name flex items center justify between and margin of 10. Inside we will class name background white flex items center justify center gap of 1 2 2 and px of 3 money rounded except. Now inside the div we get the image div class name with of 20 pixel inside the tag src start svg and margin of start class name will be same always with full and object okay. Below div we get the class name will be font symbol and text of large justify. Now below this div we get another div class name will be with of 80 pixel with image image tag and image as rating dot svg body dot rating class name same always. Okay, so I think my browser window was open while I was coding, so here's the code. You can just pause the video here and copy the code. Sorry for that. This is how the browser looks, or the hero section looks. Let's move on to the about section. Moving on, we'll next implement the about section. So again, a new file in the components folder, about section.tsx. Then here this div will have a class name of flex items start justify between py of 3 px of 12 and a margin top of 10. Now inside the div we'll have three divs. The first div will have a class name of flex item start and a gap of x of 6. The second div will not have any classes, and the third div will have the class name of flex col items center justify between and a height of 32. Now inside the first div we'll have a div with an image, so the class name here will be width of 40 pixel and margin top of 2. Inside the div will be the image which will point logo dot svg with an alt name of logo. The class name here will be width full object contain. Now below the div will be an h1 tag with a class name of text 3xl font bold and text of primary. Inside h1 I'll just paste it this about our app. So the first div is complete. We'll now move on to the second div. Now the second div will contain just a paragraph tag and then a tag. The a tag will point nowhere, and the p tag will have a class name of text primary max width rows margin bottom of 8 and font of semi-bold. Inside the p tag I'll just copy and paste what we need to write, and here it is. That's what will go inside the paragraph tag, and the class name for the a tag will be underline offset of 2 text primary and a font of semi-bold. Now what will come inside the a tag? It will be simply learn more. Now inside the third div there will be two more divs. So first div and the second div. We'll implement the second div later, so let's just finish up with the second one. So the class name here will be width of 100 pixel, and inside there it will be an image, and the source will be people.svg alt name of people. Class name will be with full and object contain. So the second div is complete. Now the first div will have a class name of border to border secondary rounded of XL padding of 2 flex item center justify between and a gap of x of 2. Now inside the first div also there will be two divs. One will house the image, so for the first one will house an image, and the second one will have a heading and a paragraph. So here the image will be there, so the class name here will be width of 30 pixel. Inside the div will be an image, and the source will be first.svg alt name will be first, and class name will be with full and object contain. Now below this div will be the second div, it will have an h3 saying product hunt and a paragraph saying hashtag product of the day, hashtag 1 product of the day. Now the class name for this div is not there, so the class name for the heading will be text access text primary, but with the opacity of 40, font of semi bold, and the class name for the paragraph tag will be text sm text primary and a font of semi bold. Let's see how this all comes together. If we move to the browser, we have to refresh it and nothing appears. Okay, that's because we have not used this component in the app.tsx. So below the hero section we'll write about section. Now let's see how this looks. Now if you move to the browser, as you can see, the about section appears. So this was the Dribbble design, and finally this is what we were able to achieve. Now of course the SVGs do not look exactly the same because I made them on my own, so there's bound to be some difference, but I say it looks pretty good. I hope you found this video helpful and learned something new about building UIs with React and Tailwind version 4. It was also my first time using Tailwind version 4 after the major update. Let me know in the comments what you would like to see next. This is just the beginning, and I'm excited to build more projects just like this. So if you want to follow along, consider subscribing and sticking around for more front-end builds. That's it for today, and I will see you in the next one.